I was reborn. Or, more accurately, I was dropped. Dropped right into the middle of a novel. The book was called The Titan of Industry, a cliché-ridden bestseller about a self-made man named Ethan Reed, the illegitimate son who clawed his way to the top of the corporate ladder. And Peyton Reed? She was the book's ultimate villain, a ruthless, vindictive shrew who ended up paralyzed, alienated, and utterly alone. In the original story, after a brutal car crash left her in a wheelchair, her family disowned her. She died in a squalid, damp basement, her body undiscovered for days. And now, standing in this sterile hospital hallway, watching the pale, sullen woman in the wheelchair, my heart was hammering against my ribs. Take the cripple, I don't care who does. But I'm not paying another cent for her medical bills. If you have to, just roll her out onto the street and let her die. The shrill voice cut through the quiet hum of the corridor. I quickened my pace, turning the corner just in time to see a wheelchair shoved violently out of her room, nearly crashing into me. The woman in the chair was skeletal, her long black hair hanging in greasy strands over her face. She was as still and lifeless as a statue. If not for the faint rise and fall of her chest, I would have thought she was already dead. Peyton, darling, it's not that your aunt is cruel. The woman who'd pushed her spat in the wheelchair's direction. Just think about it. What's the point of you being alive like this? Frowning, I stepped forward, pulled a tissue from my pocket, and gently wiped the spittle from the woman's hair. I brushed the dark strands aside, revealing a face that was pale but exquisitely structured. A high, straight nose, thin lips. Even with her eyes closed, you could tell she was a beauty. Ma'am, I said, turning to the abrasive woman. This is a hospital. Please watch your tone. Oh, look, another do-gooder, the woman sneered, sizing me up. And who are you to her? I'm Dr. Alex Sterling, I said, straightening my back. The patient needs quiet. I'm going to have to ask you to. Quiet, she screeched, cutting me off. Peyton Reed is a nobody now. Her legs are useless, her company's bankrupt, and even her fiancé ran for the hills. If I were her, I'd have already. How much does she owe? I asked, my voice cutting through hers. A nearby head nurse answered quietly, $9,800 and change. I pulled out my phone and checked my bank app. My balance was just over $10,000. My salary had just been deposited. I've been planning on getting a new phone. I'll cover it, I said, looking the woman dead in the eye. And since you're abandoning her, I'll take responsibility for her. The hallway fell silent. The woman in the wheelchair finally opened her eyes. They were as dark and cold as obsidian, her gaze sweeping over me for a fraction of a second before falling again. The head nurse grabbed my arm. Dr. Sterling, don't be impulsive. I know what I'm doing, I said, patting her hand before turning back to the aunt. So, what do you say? The woman stared at me as if I were insane. Huh, I've never seen a fool so eager to take a cripple home with him. Fine, you want to be a saint? You take her. Just don't ever come crawling to me. With that, she spun on her high heels and stormed away. I let out a long breath and knelt, bringing myself to eye level with the woman in the wheelchair. Hi, my name is Alex Sterling. I'm a doctor here. Would you be willing to come home with me? She lifted her head, her gaze as sharp as a scalpel. Why? Because... I chose my words carefully. Because nobody deserves to be thrown away. She let out a cold, humorless laugh and turned her face away, resuming her lifeless posture. Peyton Reed's worldly possessions were pitifully few. A small bag with a couple of changes of clothes and a dead iPhone. As I wheeled her out of the hospital, she remained completely silent, like an exquisite, broken doll. My apartment was small, a one-bedroom in Logan Square that was barely big enough for two. After getting her inside, I pushed her wheelchair into the center of the living room. This is your home now. She scanned the cramped space, a corner of her mouth twitching into a sarcastic smile. Dr. Sterling, what's a doctor's salary these days? Enough to afford a place like this and take in a charity case. I ignored the barb. Are you hungry? I can make you something. Not hungry, she replied curtly, turning her wheelchair to face the window, presenting me with a cold, indifferent back. I shrugged and went to the kitchen, where I heated up 2 bowls of tomato soup. When I brought them out, she was still in the same position, unmoving. Eat something, I said, placing a bowl on the small coffee table beside her. It's a classic. She finally turned, her gaze falling first on the soup, then shifting to my face. Alex, what is it you really want? I broke a couple of crackers in half. A clear conscience. Pathetic, she scoffed, but she reached out and took the bowl. We ate in silence, the only sound in the apartment the soft clinking of our spoons. Halfway through, she abruptly put her bowl down. It's terrible, I smiled. You still ate half of it. Her face tightened, and she turned away. It was too salty. Bedtime presented a new challenge. I only had one bed, and Peyton adamantly refused to let me help her change. I can do it myself, she hissed, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrest of her chair. An unnatural blush crept up her pale cheeks. You sure? I raised an eyebrow. This place isn't exactly ADA compliant. Get out, she said through gritted teeth. I had no choice but to leave the bedroom, leaning against the doorframe to listen. First came the squeak of the wheelchair wheels on the hardwood, then the rustle of fabric, followed by a sickening thud. Don't come in, she yelled, her voice sharp, stopping me as my hand reached for the doorknob. I can handle it. Another 10 minutes passed before I heard a barely audible, it's done. When I pushed the door open, Peyton was already in bed, the covers pulled up to her chin, her face atop mask. Her clothes were scattered on the floor, the wheelchair lying on its side. Good night, I said softly, tucking the blanket in around her. She closed her eyes, her long lashes casting shadows on her cheeks. In the middle of the night, I was woken by the sound of suppressed sobs. In the faint moonlight filtering through the window, I could see Peyton's back was to me, her shoulders trembling. I pretended to roll over, making a deliberate noise. The crying stopped instantly. The room was silent once more. I had the next day off and slept until noon. When I woke up, I found an extra blanket draped over me. Peyton was already in her wheelchair by the window, reading a book. Morning, I said, rubbing my eyes. She didn't look up. It's 1 p.m. I shuffled out of bed sheepishly and saw a container of oatmeal and some fruit on the dining table. You did this? I asked, surprised. Delivery, she answered coolly. I used your phone. Venmo. I took a bite. The oatmeal was surprisingly good. Thanks. She just grunted and went back to her book. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting a soft halo around her. For a moment, she didn't look like a sullen, broken woman, but an elegant lady from a wealthy family. After I ate, I suggested we go for a walk. Her expression soured immediately. No, just to the park downstairs. I said no. She snapped, her voice suddenly shrill. She knocked over a glass of water on the table. You want everyone to see what a pathetic wreck Peyton Reed has become. Is that it? I silently wiped up the spill and didn't bring it up again. That afternoon, I went to the grocery store. When I got back, Peyton wasn't in the living room. The bedroom door was closed, and I could hear a faint noise from within. Peyton, I knocked. I'm home. No response. A terrible feeling washed over me, and I threw the door open. Peyton was sitting on the edge of the bed, a fruit knife in her hand, holding the blade against her wrist. Stop. I lunged forward and snatched the knife from her. What are you doing? She looked at me coldly. What? Are you going to take away my right to die too? I was trembling with anger. I paid 10 grand to keep you alive. Your life is mine to worry about now, and you don't get to throw it away without my permission. Alex, she said, a cruel smirk on her pale face. Who do you think you are? Some kind of savior. I threw the knife out the open window and knelt in front of her. I'm not a savior, but I can't just stand by and watch you die. She turned her head away, but not before I saw that her eyes were red. That night, I sat on the edge of her bed and told her my story. I was an orphan, raised in a series of foster homes. In middle school, I got seriously ill, and with no money for treatment, I almost died. So, I said softly, just do it for me. Live a little longer. Peyton was silent for a long time. Finally, she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. As the days passed, Peyton's attitude slowly softened. She stopped talking about death and even began to help with small things around the apartment. One evening, I came home from a long shift to the smell of food cooking. Peyton was in her wheelchair in front of the stove, a simple meal of chicken and roasted vegetables laid out on the counter. Try it, she said, not meeting my eyes. If it's bad, you don't have to eat it. I took a bite of the chicken. It was perfectly seasoned. My eyes widened in surprise. This is delicious. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly before she quickly suppressed the smile. I used too much salt. From that day on, Peyton took over the cooking. I bought her a new smartphone, and she spent her days researching recipes on YouTube. Her culinary skills improved dramatically. We're having salmon tonight, she announced one evening as she dished it onto plates. I leaned in to smell it. Smells amazing. She gently pushed me away. Don't stand so close. But I noticed that this time, her expression wasn't one of disgust. On my weekends off, I'd take her to a nearby park. At first, she resisted fiercely, hiding her face behind a large scarf and sunglasses. But gradually, she became less tense. On sunny days, she would even be the one to suggest we go out. Alex, she asked me one day, why are you so good to me? I was massaging her atrophied leg muscles at the time and looked up. Am I? Yes, she said, looking at me intently. You could have just left me there. I thought for a moment. Maybe because, when I look at you, I see a part of my old self. Lonely, hopeless, needing someone to pull me out of the darkness. She was quiet for a while before saying softly, "Thank you." Those two words felt like a piece of candy, melting sweetly in my chest. The changes in Peyton became more and more obvious. She started taking care of her appearance, tying her long hair back in a neat ponytail. She would text me when I worked late, asking when I'd be home. She even developed a habit of making me a cup of hot lemon tea every night. But I noticed that sometimes she would stare at her legs, her expression turning dark and terrifying. "Do you want to walk again?" I asked her directly one day. "I know a great physical therapist." "No," she cut me off coldly. "Don't waste your energy." I dropped the subject, but I secretly contacted the therapist and made an appointment for the following month. The crisis came on a rainy night. I was working late, and a torrential downpour had started outside. My colleague, Dr. Evans, offered to give me a ride home. "Thanks so much," I said, sinking in the passenger seat. "You saved me from looking like a drowned rat." Dr. Evans laughed. "It's no problem, Alex. We're colleagues." When we got to my building, I invited her up for a cup of tea to get out of the rain. The moment I opened the door, I saw Peyton waiting, her face a thundercloud. "Who is she?" she asked, her voice like ice, her eyes sharp as daggers. Dr. Evans extended her hand awkwardly. I wasn't asking you." Peyton snapped, her glare shifting to me. "Alex, explain." I was completely baffled. "This is my colleague, Sarah. She gave me a ride home because of the storm." Peyton let out a bitter laugh, spun her wheelchair around, and disappeared into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. After I saw Dr. Evans out, I pushed open the bedroom door. Peyton was sitting by the window, her back to me, her shoulders trembling slightly. "Peyton," I called softly. She whipped around, and I was shocked to see tear tracks on her face. "Alex," she said, her voice hoarse, "are you disgusted with me? With this chair?" It finally clicked. My heart ached for her. "What? Don't be ridiculous." "Then why?" She gripped the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white. "Why did you let her bring you home? I can't pick you up. I can't even bring you an umbrella." I knelt down and took her hand. "I don't care about any of that." "But I do," she practically screamed. "I hate myself like this. I wish I could just lock you in here. Make it so you could only ever depend on me." Her words made my heart skip a beat. In the moonlight, her pale face was flushed with a feverish intensity, her eyes obsessive and wild. In that moment, I saw the real Peyton. Not the quiet woman who cooked my meals, but the obsessive, tormented villain from a novel. "Peyton," I said softly, "I like you. The person, not your legs." She froze, fresh tears rolling silently down her cheeks. I leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her lips. "Do you understand now?" Her eyes widened. Then, she grabbed the back of my head and deepened the kiss, her touch desperate and possessive. After we made things official, Peyton became even more attached. She'd call me into the kitchen while she was cooking, ostensibly to taste something, but really just to steal a kiss. When I was on night shift, my phone would buzz with a constant stream of texts asking when I was coming home. She even started researching physical therapy, secretly doing leg exercises on her own. "Thinking about walking again?" I tease her. Her ears turned red. "Yes." I swept her up in a hug. "That's fantastic. I already made an appointment with a therapist for next week." "Not yet," she interrupted. "First, your birthday." I'd almost forgotten. My birthday was just a few days away. On the day itself, I had to work late. When I got home, the apartment was pitch black. "Peyton." I fumbled for the light switch, but it wouldn't turn on. The power was out. "In here," her voice came from the bedroom. I followed the sound and found the room lit by a few candles. Peyton was sitting on the edge of the bed, a lopsided cake on a nightstand in front of her. "Happy birthday," she said softly. It's my first time making one. It's probably not very good." In the candlelight, her face was incredibly soft. I noticed fresh burn marks on her hands, and a lump formed in my throat. "Thank you," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I love it." She smiled, and it was the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. Just as we were about to cut the cake, the power surged back on. The harsh overhead light flooded the apartment, revealing the utter chaos in the kitchen: spilled frosting, scattered utensils, and most damningly, a clear set of drag marks on the floor. I understood instantly. She had fallen and had to crawl back to her wheelchair, but she had been determined to finish that cake. "Peyton." I wrapped my arms around her, my heart aching. She whispered in my ear, "Alex, I love you." Our life together was sweet and peaceful, until the day the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Standing outside were a man and a woman I didn't recognize. The man was tall and handsome, the woman graceful and lovely. They were holding several expensive-looking gift bags. "Can I help you?" I asked, confused. "Hello," the man said politely. "I'm Ethan Reed, and this is my wife, Maya Bishop. We're here to see Peyton." My entire body went rigid. These were the hero and heroine from novel. "She's not here," I said coldly, moving to close the door. "Alex," Peyton's voice came from behind me. "Let them in." I turned in surprise. Peyton was sitting in her wheelchair, holding a stray cat we had found last week. Ethan Reed's jaw nearly hit the floor. "Peyton, you have a cat." Peyton shot him a look. "Is there a law against it?" Maya looked just as stunned. "Peyton, you've changed so much." "Cut the crap," Peyton said impatiently. "Put the stuff down and go help in the kitchen." I stared, dumbfounded, as the legendary hero and heroine of the book meekly went to the kitchen to wash vegetables, while Peyton calmly began to brush the cat's fur. I pointed toward the kitchen, unable to form a coherent sentence. Peyton pulled me down to sit beside her. "My brother and his wife." "Brother?" I exclaimed. "But in the book." "The book is the book," she cut me off. "The reality is, Ethan is my half-brother. Our father was a monster who drove my mother to her death, and then tried to turn us against each other." She said it all so casually, as if she were talking about someone else's life. During dinner, Ethan took out a bank card. "Peyton, here's $4 million. Peyton snatched it from his hand. I appreciate the sentiment, and I'll take the money. While you're at it, use some of it to buy this condo for me." Ethan was speechless. Maya was speechless. I was speechless. After dinner, the siblings talked privately on the balcony. I overheard Ethan say, "You've really changed, Peyton." Peyton's voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Yeah, it's because I found someone I want to protect." After her guests left, Peyton took my hand. "Alex, I want you to come with me to physical therapy next week." I looked at her, overjoyed. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," she said, kissing me. "I want to stand up again. I want to stand on my own 2 feet, right next to you." In the moonlight, her eyes shone like stars. I knew then that the dark, bitter Peyton Reed was gone for good. In her place was someone new, someone who loved me deeply. Extra 1. Our happy life. The day Peyton decided to start physical therapy, the weather was perfect. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, and when I woke up, she was already dressed and waiting for me in her wheelchair. She wore loose-fitting athletic pants and a black t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a high ponytail. She looked ready for anything. "Today's the day?" I asked, rubbing my eyes, a little surprised by her eagerness. "Yep." She nodded, her fingers drumming unconsciously on the armrest. "Didn't you say you made an appointment?" I slid out of bed and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in mine. "Are you sure you're ready?" She bit her lip, her gaze flickering for a second before hardening with resolve. "I can't stay like this forever." I smiled and leaned in to kiss her forehead. "Okay, I'm with you all the way." The rehabilitation center was bright, spacious, and filled with state-of-the-art equipment. The therapist, a warm and professional woman in her 30s named Dr. Lynn, gave Peyton a thorough assessment before laying out a treatment plan. "The muscle atrophy isn't as bad as it could be, but the nerve damage will take time to repair," Dr. Lynn told me. "The initial phase will be very painful. She's going to need a lot of encouragement from you." I nodded, my eyes on Peyton. She sat on the therapy table, looking down, her expression calm, but I knew she must be terrified. The first day's exercises were simple, passive joint movements and light electrical muscle stimulation. Even so, beads of sweat formed on Peyton's forehead. She gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. "It's okay to say it hurts," I said, standing beside her, my heart aching. She just shook her head, gritting her teeth. "I'm fine." By the end of the session, her face was deathly pale, and she looked as if she'd been dragged through water. I knelt to wipe the sweat from her brow, and she suddenly grabbed my wrist, her voice low and ragged. "Alex, am I pathetic?" I was taken aback for a moment, then shook my head firmly. "Don't be ridiculous. You're the strongest person I've ever met." She didn't say anything, just leaned her head against my shoulder and let out a soft sigh. 3 months of grueling therapy went by. Peyton's progress was slow, but it was there. She started to regain sensation in her legs, first tingling, then the ability to feel sharp pain or changes in temperature. Dr. Lynn said it was a great sign. The nerves were waking up. One afternoon, we were the only 2 left in the therapy room. Peyton was sitting on the edge of a mat, her hands gripping a set of parallel bars, trying to push herself up. Her arms trembled with the effort, sweat plastering her hair to her temples. "One more time," I said, standing in front of her, my hands outstretched. "I've got you." She took a deep breath, clenched her jaw, and pushed with all her might. Her knees bent, and then, miraculously, her feet planted firmly on the floor. I'm standing, she whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with disbelief. Yes, you're standing. I nearly shouted with joy, rushing to steady her hips. Easy now. Don't rush it. Her legs were shaking violently, but they were holding her weight. It was only for a few seconds, but she had done it. She had stood up on her own. Alex. She looked up at me, her eyes welling with tears. I did it. I pulled her into a hug, and she collapsed against my chest, her body trembling with emotion. Yeah, you did, I murmured into her hair. I knew you could. That night, we broke our rule and opened a bottle of red wine to celebrate. Peyton sat on the couch while I knelt before her, gently massaging her calves. Sore? I asked. She shook her head, looking down at me. She reached out and touched my face. Alex, thank you. I smiled. For what? For not giving up on me. I took her hand. Peyton, I will never give up on you. She didn't answer, just leaned down and kissed me. Peyton's recovery continued to improve. She couldn't walk long distances yet, but she could get around with a walker. Our life settled into a new normal. She took on more household chores and even got into baking. The first time she tried to make cookies, she nearly burned the kitchen down. I rushed in to find her frantically trying to turn off a smoking oven, her face smudged with flour. It's a disaster, she said, annoyed. I couldn't help but laugh as I wiped her cheek. It's okay. It's like that the first time. She frowned. But I wasted all the ingredients. Try again, I suggested. She nodded, and after another afternoon of effort, she produced a tray of cookies that were, at least, edible. They were misshapen, but they tasted pretty good. Success, she said, a rare, childlike grin lighting up her face. I took one and tasted it, teasing her. Barely passing. She glared at me. Then don't eat them. I laughed and leaned in to kiss her. But my girlfriend made them, so I have to eat every last one, even if they're terrible. Her ears turned pink, and she gave me a light shove. Smooth talker, Peyton's brother, Ethan, visited occasionally, always bringing a mountain of supplements and organic foods to help with her recovery. Peyton would roll her eyes, but always put everything away neatly. Were you and your brother always close? I asked her once. She was quiet for a moment. He was always good to me. I was just too stubborn to see it back then. I nodded and didn't press. Then one day, Ethan asked me out of the blue, Dr. Sterling, what about your family? Should we all have dinner together sometime? I paused and smiled. In this world, I'm an orphan. No family to speak of. Ethan looked embarrassed. Oh, I'm sorry. It's fine, I waved it off. I'm used to it. Peyton, who had been listening, suddenly spoke. Alex, yeah, this weekend, you're coming home with me, she said. Home? I didn't follow. She looked out the window, then said, Alex, when my legs are a little better, let's get married. My hand froze. What did you say? She turned to face me, her eyes deadly serious. I said, let's get married. My heart skipped a beat, and then a huge grin spread across my face. Okay, but what? Isn't proposing supposed to be my job? I raised an eyebrow. She sniffed. It doesn't matter who asks. I laughed out loud and took her hand. Peyton Reed, you're never getting away from me. She squeezed my hand back, a small smile playing on her lips. Good? I'm not trying to. Extra 2. The downfall of Laura Reed. Peyton's legs were getting stronger every day. She could now walk short distances with a cane. That afternoon, I went with her to a medical supply store to pick out a more advanced leg brace. She tried on a few before settling on a lightweight carbon fiber model. This one has good support, and it's not too heavy, I said, adjusting the straps for her. What does it feel? She took a few experimental steps and nodded. It's okay. Just then, a sharp, nasal voice cut through the air behind us. Well, if it isn't Peyton Reed. We both turned. A middle-aged woman draped in an ostentatious fur coat and caked in makeup stood a few feet away, clutching several luxury shopping bags. Her eyes, filled with contempt, raked over Peyton from head to toe. Peyton's body went rigid. Her fingers tightened on her cane until her knuckles were white. I recognized her immediately. It was Peyton's aunt, Laura Reed, the same woman who had humiliated her at the hospital, who had tossed her aside like trash. What? They let cripples go shopping now, Laura said, sauntering closer on her stilettos, a cruel smirk on her red lips. Looks like you found yourself a nice little caretaker. She shot a suggestive look at me. Young man, it must be exhausting, waiting on an invalid. A hot flash of anger shot through me. I was about to say something, but Peyton beat me to it, her voice dangerously low. Laura, you might want to clean up that filthy mouth of yours. Laura clutched her chest in mock horror. Oh my, still got some fire in you, do you? I guess having someone to lean on has made you brave. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a malicious whisper. Peyton, do you really think you can ever go back to the way things were? Stop dreaming. You're a washed-up cripple. Even your own parents didn't want you. Peyton's face went chalk white, but she didn't flinch. Instead, a cold smile touched her lips. Laura, you should pray that you stay on top forever. The venom in her eyes made Laura recoil for a second before she bristled with rage. You, ma'am, I stepped directly in front of Peyton, my voice like ice. If you continue to harass my girlfriend, I won't hesitate to call security. Laura blinked, then let out a derisive cackle. Girlfriend? Huh. Peyton, I guess a broke, clueless doctor is all you can get now. She tossed her hair and turned to leave, deliberately bumping Peyton's side as she passed. Peyton swayed, and I quickly steadied her. Are you okay? She shook her head, her gaze dark as she watched Laura's retreating back. Alex, she said softly, let's go home. On the way back, Peyton was silent. I knew Laura's appearance had ripped open a wound that had just begun to heal. That night, I came out of the shower to find Peyton in the study, sitting in front of her laptop. The cold glow of the screen made her features look sharp and dangerous. What are you looking at? I asked, coming up behind her to massage her shoulders. She didn't look up, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Laura Reed. I leaned in. On the screen was a detailed business intelligence report. Several of the med spas owned by Laura Reed were under investigation for providing illegal medical services. She's made a lot of dirty money with those clinics over the years, Peyton said with a cold laugh. Passing off cheap fillers as high-end imports, performing cosmetic procedures without a license. There's already a list of customer complaints a mile long. I frowned. That's serious? Worse. She clicked open another file. She's also been cooking her books. Tax evasion. The numbers are substantial. I was surprised. How did you find all this? She finally looked up at me, a faint, dangerous smile on her lips. Alex, did you really think I spent all those years in the business world for nothing? It hit me then. Peyton Reed was once the ruthless head of Reed Industries. Even though she had stepped down, her network and her killer instincts were still very much intact. What are you going to do? I asked. She closed the laptop, her eyes turning to ice. Make her pay. A week later, Laura Reed's med spas were raided. 3 of her locations were shut down. When the news broke, her clients demanded refunds en masse, and her business partners pulled their funding. To make matters worse, the IRS launched a full-scale audit, uncovering nearly $10 million in unpaid taxes. Laura panicked. She started calling in favors, even reaching out to Ethan, begging him for help. Ethan, you're close with your sister. Can't you just ask her to let this go? Laura was practically sobbing over the phone. Ani knows she was wrong. I was terrible to her before. Ethan hung up on her and immediately called Peyton. Peyton, Laura's trying to get to you, he said, his tone complicated. It sounds like she's really at the end of her rope. Peyton was in the kitchen making coffee. She didn't even turn around. What's that got to do with me? Ethan sighed. Her assets have been frozen. Her house is being foreclosed on, and I hear she's drowning in debt. I sat on the sofa, listening silently, feeling not a shred of pity. I remembered how Laura had treated Peyton at the hospital, how she had practically wished her dead. Now that the tables had turned, she knew how to beg for mercy. Laura's end was even more miserable than we'd imagined. Her business empire collapsed, leaving her with a mountain of debt. Creditors hounded her daily. She had to sell her mansion and luxury cars, moving into a tiny, run-down apartment. The irony was, none of the high society friends she had once fawned over would even take her calls. One evening, Peyton and I were having dinner at a restaurant when we saw her. She was wearing cheap clothes, her hair was a mess, and her makeup was smudged. The arrogant woman was gone. When she saw us, her eyes darted away, and she hurried out, her head down. Should we follow? I asked. Peyton shook her head, took a sip of her wine, and said flatly, there's no need. Her expression was calm. There was no joy of revenge, no pity. It was as if she were looking at a complete stranger. I knew that Laura Reed no longer mattered. On the way home, Peyton said suddenly, Alex, I'm thinking about taking back some of my responsibilities at Reed Industries. I was surprised. Your leg. It won't be an issue. She smiled. Besides, Ethan's carrying too much on his own. I want to help him. I squeezed her hand. Whatever you want to do, I'll support you. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Thank you. I kissed her forehead. For what? For giving me the courage to start over. I smiled and held her tighter. Peyton, your good days are just beginning. And as for those who hurt you, they will always, eventually, reap what they sow. Extra 3. Peyton's perspective. I hated the world. From the day of the car crash, my legs were nothing more than 2 useless dead weights. And the people who had once orbited my life, family, friends, my fiancée, vanished as if I were a plague. The day my aunt came to the hospital, I kept my eyes closed and pretended to be asleep. Take the cripple, I don't care who does. Her voice was a shrill nail on a chalkboard. I'm not paying another cent. I'd expected it. The Reeds had always been that way. Profit over people, power over principle. Just like my father, who had discarded my mother for a better business alliance. Just like me when I had ruthlessly pushed Ethan down to secure my own position. This was just karma. I calmly waited for death to come for me. But then a doctor named Alex Sterling knelt in front of me and bought my life for $10,000. His apartment was small, a one-bedroom with worn-out furniture. When he wheeled me inside, he had this look of idiotic kindness on his face. This is your home now. Home? I scoffed internally. A cripple doesn't have a home. He made me soup. It was bland and terrible, but I ate it all because I was starving. That night, he tried to help me change, and I drove him out of the room with a rage that surprised even me. I can do it myself, but I couldn't. I couldn't even do something that simple. When I fell from the wheelchair, the pain was blinding, but I bit my lip until it bled to keep from crying out. When Alex rushed in, I was curled up on the floor like a dying animal. Get out. My voice was shaking. Don't look at me. He didn't say a word. He just silently lifted me back onto the bed and then cleaned up the mess I'd made of myself and the room. In that moment, I hated my own powerlessness more than anything in the world. Alex was an infuriating man. Every morning, he'd buzz around me with an endless stream of questions. What do you want for breakfast today? Want to get some sun? Let me massage your legs. I would brush him off with annoyed grunts, but slowly, I grew accustomed to the noise of his presence. One day, while he was at work, I took a fruit knife and held it to my wrist. Being alive is just a burden anyway, but just as the cold steel touched my skin, the lock turned. Peyton! Alex burst in, his face white as a sheet as he tore the knife from my hand. What are you doing? I stared at him. My life is my own. He was shaking with anger. I paid 10 grand for that life. It was almost funny, a broke doctor trying to play God. But that night, he sat by my bed and told me his story, growing up in the foster system, nearly dying alone in a dorm room because no one was there to care. So, he said, his voice soft, just do it for me. Live a little longer. I turned my back to him as silent tears soaked my pillow. I started cooking for Alex. The first time I tried to fry an egg, I nearly set the smoke alarm off. He ran in and turned off the stove, and I snapped at him. Who told you to come in here? He just smiled and wiped a smudge of grease from my cheek. I'll teach you next time. Gradually, I learned how to make soup, stir-fries, even bake cookies. Every time I watched him eat what I'd made with genuine enjoyment, a strange warmth would bloom in my chest. This isn't right. I was Peyton Reed, a shark, feared. Now I was puttering around a kitchen like a housewife. What was even more terrifying was that I found myself waiting for him to come home from work. The night of the big storm, Alex came home with a female colleague. This is my co-worker, he said with a smile. I stared at the woman's hand on his arm, and my chest tightened as if a snake were coiled around it. Who does she think she is, touching him? The moment Alex saw her out, I exploded. Are you disgusted with me? Do you think I'm not good enough for you anymore? My voice was raw. He just stood there, stunned, before pulling me into a tight hug. Peyton, I like you. The person. I buried my face in his shoulder and sobbed. It was so humiliating. To lose control over something so trivial. Physical therapy was hell. But every time I wanted to give up, I would see Alex standing across the room, his eyes shining as he looked at me. You got this, he would mouth. He was such an idiot. But it was that idiot who got me through the worst of the pain. The first time my feet stood firm on the ground, Alex hugged me, his own eyes red. You did it. I leaned into his embrace, breathing in the familiar, clean scent of antiseptic from his scrubs, and thought, it's good to be alive. Now, Alex is asleep beside me, his breathing deep and even. I gently traced the line of his brow, remembering a question he once asked me. Peyton, do you ever regret meeting me? Regret it. I lean close to his ear and whisper, Alex, you are never, ever getting rid of me. In his sleep, the corner of his mouth quirks into a smile, and his arm tightens around my waist.